welcome to another episode of the Sports Authority Gurus podcast. I am your host, Keegan Russell, and I'm excited to be with you guys here again today. If you haven't done so yet, please hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening from, and follow us and like us on both Twitter and Facebook. Alright, tonight I am joined by a special co-host. We've been trying to get together for an episode for a while now, just haven't done it, and tonight we're finally getting to it. So let me introduce my co-host to you today, Tyler Crispin. Tyler, welcome to the show. How are we doing?
What's going on? I'm doing pretty good. I'm glad we could make this happen.
Yeah, so we've been talking about this for months now, and are finally getting around to it. So this episode specifically, we're going to talk some Chiefs football, talk more about training camp, and go through all that. But Tyler's going to be with me on future episodes. We're going to talk a lot about KU football, KU basketball, and just Chiefs in general, and I'm sure we'll come up with some other stuff down the road. So before we jump into that, Tyler, why don't you share with us a couple facts about you when it comes to sports, talk to us a little bit about your sports fandom, favorite teams, favorite players growing up, that kind of stuff.
Well, I'm kind of a lot like most of the people around here. I like the local teams. So KU football, it's been kind of rough the last few years, but stick with them through thick and thin, and I think it's going to be an exciting season. And, of course, basketball, they're always going to be pretty good. And then the Royals. And then the Chiefs, looking forward to the NFL season that's coming up. And I think it'll be fun. It'll be cool to see all the different changes and how the rookies and stuff do. I'm excited.
So since this is a Chiefs episode, give me a couple of your favorite players over the years that you've loved watching the most.
Over the years,
and it can't be the easy ones like Mahomes because that's everyone's favorite.
Yeah. So I would say more recently, I know he was a rookie last year, but Nick Bolton, he's fun to watch. He looks like he's got a good understanding of the defense, and he looks like he's always in the right place. And kind of a throwback, Derek Thomas. I remember being really little when he was kind of in his prime, and I can kind of remember some of what he was going through before and I actually remember the day of his car accident coming down and my dad telling me, and that was kind of tough. But
yeah, I missed that era of Chiefs football. That was just when I was too little to know what was going on, but that would have been great to watch him play.
Yeah, he was, I can't remember a whole lot, but he's one that did stick out because I think does he still have the record for... It was like 7 sacks in a game, I think, against the Seahawks, maybe.
Yeah, he still holds the Chiefs record for most in a game. Well, let's jump into Chiefs. So, Chiefs training camp, if you joined us in my last Chiefs episode, it's been about 2 weeks now. That one came out during the first week of training camp. This is now kind of that week 3 period where everyone's in camp. We've had a few additions and things since the last time we recorded. It's kind of funny. The last time I recorded, the next day, Carlos Dunlap signed with the Chiefs, and I just missed it by a day, so we'll talk about that. But training camp is underway, like I've said. Things are kind of full swing. You're getting a lot of video coming out of camp and seeing a lot of cool stuff. So let's just jump in to that. Let's start with this offense. Probably the biggest question mark coming into the offseason after the Tyreek Hill trade was, what is this offense going to look like with a completely different group of receivers? Can somebody step up to replace Tyreek Hill's production? And how is that offense just going to look in general? Is it going to be a lot of Mahomes to Kelsey? How are they going to fill that production gap? And so far, I think fans have a lot to be excited about with this new receiver core. Juju's kind of taken the early lead as the number one receiver outside of Kelsey. Haven't seen a whole lot yet out of MVS, but I think that's just more of getting to know the play style that they're going for. But we've also seen a lot of exciting things about Sky Moore, Nicole Hardman. If you guys have been watching any videos coming out of camp, Sky Moore is an impressive athlete.
Yeah, they've been lining up in the backfield too.
So give me your observations so far. What do you think about this receiving core? Can they put together enough production amidst the group to replace Tyreek Hill? What's that going to look like?
Well, I think you said it right because there's not going to be a one-for-one replacement of Tyreek Hill. I mean, he's the only Tyreek Hill in the NFL. So I think it's going to be more of a group effort, and there's certain guys that are going to bring certain things to the table that I think, when added up, can be somewhat close to what Tyreek has produced over the years. You have Juju who's going to work underneath, and maybe in the slot some, and then MVS could be the big hitter guy, that's running the go routes, and they're throwing it down the field. And then I think it's going to be really exciting to see how Andy Reid uses Sky Moore, because he can be, like I said, lined up all over the field in the backfield, and it'll be interesting. I'm sure it'll take a while for them to get going, but I think with Andy Reid and Mahomes, they're gonna figure out ways to use those guys to the best of their abilities, and it should be fun to watch.
Yeah, this is a really dynamic group from a skill set standpoint. We probably, as we've talked on the last Chiefs episode and earlier throughout the year, very different looking team without Tyreek. You don't have that same down the field, take the top off the defense instantly kind of guy. But now you've got a variety of receivers. You've got a guy like Juju who could be your possession guy, get you 10 to 13 catches a game, be a threat through the middle, third down threat. Kind of that Sammy Watkins role, but more of an everyday presence. You do bring a guy in like MVS who's got that over-the-top speed, but he's also 6'4", and that's something Mahomes hasn't had a target that he can just throw the ball up to and go get. But Sky Moore's probably been one of the most exciting players to watch so far, just because he's so dynamic. They've lined him up in the backfield, like you said, having him do end-arounds, reverses, jet sweeps, playing in the slot. He's got incredible hands, and we talked about that in the last episode, that he had some of the best hands in the draft, and just they can plug him in anywhere on the field. And then, of course, you bring McColl in there with his speed, and he can still take you over the top. So I think this actually is setting them up to have a much better offense, because the ball can be distributed across the field to multiple guys. And now when you're getting out there to line up, you're not just trying to double-team Tyreek and Kelsey and hope that Demarcus Robinson goes off for a big game. Now you've got guys that have legitimate skill sets to make up that production you're losing from Tyreek. So I'm excited about that. How about the running backs? There's kind of 4 or 5 of them right now, and we'll get into position battles here in a little bit. Preseason, training camp, you don't see a whole lot of the run game because it's really about installing the offense as a whole, and you're letting your line gel and your guys understand the playbook. But interesting group there too. Ronald Jones, different type of back. He's not your traditional pass catcher. We've seen a ton of good things about Pacheco, lightning quick. They've been using him out of the backfield in the receiving game as well. Use him as a kick returner, punt returner. Looks like he does have some similarities to Tyreek, just different type of player. Obviously, you can't replace that, even though he is wearing number 10. But what has been your thoughts on Pacheco so far? Has he impressed you?
I think he has. From everything I've read and seen, it seems like he's further along than what even the coaches thought. So that's pretty impressive for a rookie, especially with Andy Reid and that kind of offense. It's been kind of a tough thing to pick up. It's not one of the easier offenses. He's got a lot of different packages and stuff that usually it takes rookies time to learn, and it looks like he's hit the ground running. And I know they're excited that he's going to return kicks, and I did see where Andy Reid said that he wanted to see him be able to break tackles at the NFL level. But he's a big guy that's got 4.3 speed, and that'll play, especially in an offense like ours. I'm excited to see how they use him, and I think he'll have a really good rookie year.
Yeah, he's definitely benefiting from the opportunity he's been given. He's getting a lot of looks with the first team, which I think is good in training camp. We know CEH is probably going to be the number 1 guy heading into the season, but you don't know what your guys are capable of until you put them in that role. So I don't know if Sky Moore can be the number 1 receiver unless I put him out in that role and throw to him.
Yep.
I don't know if Pacheco is going to be able to handle that without putting him out there. So for me, that's what training camp's all about. You start off with the guys that you know are there, and they're going to be your consistent everyday guys. But as you get into preseason, obviously we're not going to see a whole bunch of the starters this weekend in the first game. But it's really about those guys that are further down the depth chart. Seeing what they're capable of. Can they showcase any of their skill set to get more playing time and how they factor it? So offense is going to be exciting. We'll get into some position battles here in a little bit and kind of break that down further. But let's jump other side of the ball to the defense here. So since we recorded last, Chiefs have done a couple things on the defensive side. They went out and signed Carlos Dunlap, a free agent edge rusher, just a day or two after I posted the last episode. And he is now bringing into the mix. He averages about 8.5 sacks each year. A little bit older. I think he's sitting at about 31, 32. It's a little bit older of an edge rusher, but he's consistent. So they brought him in, and then just this week today they signed defensive tackle Danny Shelton, who another veteran guy. He's been around a couple teams here. Not much of a sack guy, but good in the run game, and just another big body to throw up in the middle. So if we were doing this 2.5 weeks ago, most Chiefs fans would kind of be worried about the rush and the defensive line, relying on Chris Jones and Frank Clark to get you sacked. So now we add in Carlos Dunlap. How do you think that factors into what we'll do on defense? Obviously, you have first-round pick George Karlaftis. Do you think that kind of takes some pressure off him to ease him in because you can rely on a guy like Dunlap, or is it just another piece to add in? So kind of walk me through what you think this defensive line is going to look like with those two additions and how that factors in with Frank and Jones and the rest of the guys.
Well, I think the depth along the defensive line is never a bad thing. Just because, over the course of the season, you never know who's going to be nicked up. And, so having guys with experience like Dunlap, I think it will take some pressure off Karlaftis. But that guy's got one heck of a motor, so I think when he's on the field, he's going to make an impact. And that's one thing I like. It seems like Beach targeted a lot of guys that played hard and were sure tacklers and, had good motors. And I think that'll play well. Like even, a lot of the top sack guys, the one thing they're known for is never giving it. Like Tom Hawley, he had a heck of a motor for the Chiefs, and I think we're getting some of that in Karlaftis. And I think even Frank Clark looks great. He's dropped a lot of weight. And
Chris Jones said today he thinks he's dropped 35 pounds.
Yeah, and I mean that's going to make him faster, and he's in a contract year, isn't he? So that's
pretty much
a pretty good motivator. I think he's going to have a good season. But anytime you can add experienced players on the defensive line, I don't think it's a bad thing, because the lines are always going to decide games on both sides in the trenches, and having a good run stuffer behind what's his name, Nandi.
Behind Deck,
Yeah. It didn't come to me for a second, but I think having a depth behind him would be good too.
Yeah, I think unless you have one of those surefire Aaron Donald types that just plays 3-4 possessions a game. I'm sorry, 3 or 4 plays per series.
Over the game.
Where you're out there first, second, third, fourth down, all that. Unless you have one of those guys, you really got to have depth at the line to rotate guys in. So now instead of having one really expensive DN to get you 16 sacks, now you hope that depth you could spread out. You could bring a guy in for a series like Dunlap, maybe give him a couple plays off to rest, and then swap him in with the Karlaftis or Mike Dana, and kind of spread out that production.
Tariq Wharton, he looked pretty good last year. He was out of, what was it, Missouri Science and Technical College, like a D2 school.
Yeah. And
he's undersized for being on the interior defensive line, but he showed flashes last year, and hopefully he can improve on that. They'll be fun to watch.
Yeah. The biggest question there is how much pressure is Chris Jones going to put on the quarterback. He's got to do more. He just flat out, he has to be a double-digit sack guy for this team to be successful. And then next to him, Frank Clark. What is he going to look like? He's definitely slimmed down, looks healthier. If you've paid attention to some of the press conferences, he said he gave up alcohol and has been cutting back on red meat. Just all the stomach issues he's had over the years. He's hoping this really helps him, and I'm sure dropping that weight, that's going to help him physically. But I've also been impressed with outside of plays. He's staying after practice with the young guys and working on moves with them. So leadership is definitely a big thing there with him, and I'm glad to see him still pursuing that, even though his production doesn't always speak for itself. So that's exciting there. So then we go back a level to the linebackers. This is one of the youngest linebacking corps in the league. You've got your two-headed tandem with Nick Bolton coming into his second year and Willie Gay in his third. Two guys that are crazy athletic. Bolton, like you said, one of those guys that has incredibly high motor. He just seems to get to the ball wherever it is. Anytime a play is made, Nick Bolton's the guy. I think he's going to lead the team in tackles next year, and he might be one of the guys in the league that's top 10 tackles in the league too. So you pair him up with a guy like Willie Gay, who's good sideline to sideline, good coverage linebacker, really quick, and then you bring in some veteran pieces like Jermaine Carter and Elijah Lee to kind of factor with him. But then you get your next rookie, Leo Chanal, and if you guys have seen tape on him, that man can hit. He hits hard. He's violent, as he likes to say. And he knows when he's out there, his job is to get to the quarterback, get to the guy with the ball, and knock the snot out of. So what have you seen from him that gets you excited? And do you think he'll be in the mix early, or is that one that we're going to develop and maybe we don't see until later in the year?
Yeah, the first thing that kind of jumps out is when we drafted him, all the athletic testing, there were some things that he just tested off the charts for. Like he was in the top 5% of linebackers tested since they started the Spark ratings or whatever it was that they... and then the other thing with him is he's a sure tackler, and I think that's something that the Chiefs have been missing over the last several years.
Definitely.
That, we need guys that come in, wrap up, and how many times last year did we see, another team's receiver or running back get the ball and then fall forward, dragging a few Chiefs players 3 and 4 yards further down the field? I think having that physicality from the linebacker spot is going to help. And you pair that with, like we said, Frank Clark, and hopefully that'll take some pressure off of Chris Jones. And if he knows he has help, then he can just focus on going all out every play. And it's just exciting to see that we're focusing on guys that bring physicality and aren't afraid to just go all out and do whatever it takes. And
yeah, like you said, that's something that seems to have been missing the last 5, 6, 7 years. Surefire tacklers. Derek Johnson, one of the best tacklers we've had, but we really haven't had much consistency in that. You see guys get hit in the backfield and they're breaking a tackle. You see a guy get into the second level and he's breaking a tackle. So now you've got a linebacker core that every single one of them can wrap up, tackle, can chase, and I think that's going to be huge because that'll help out when the line's not getting to the quarterback quick enough. That gives them the next line of defense to keep the secondary from struggling. So,
and I think that changes the whole mindset of a defense is when you've got guys out there that are sure tacklers, that it just gets everybody fired up, and they know that even if it's like a 3rd and 1, that they've got a good chance of stopping, and anytime they can get Mahomes in the offense more chances, to me as a defense that would fire me up to be able to know that you've got the athletes in place to be able to make stops when you need to, and when everybody knows that you need to stop here and you can get that done. It just the morale of the team can skyrocket, and I think it just builds on one guy makes a heck of a play and then another one guy does, and it's kind of a chain reaction, and I think it'll be really cool to watch that develop.
Absolutely. So then we get to the secondary, and the secondary is another interesting group. A lot of young guys, a lot of turnover. You lose Tyrann Mathieu, and say what you will about his production last year, wasn't the best. He was the leader of this defense. He knew the system in and out. You move on from him. You bring in Justin Reed, who is an experienced safety. Maybe not quite to the same talent level as Mathieu, but he has a lot to showcase, a lot to prove. Juan Thornhill's coming off of a decent season, and now he's put in a prime position to show what he's capable of. He's really the leader of that secondary as much as Justin Reed is because he's the most tenured. But you've got a really young group of cornerbacks. Even L'Jarius Sneed coming into his 3rd year didn't have the best year last year, but he's partnered up with 2 rookies, Rashad Fenton, who's also a young guy, and then they've got some depth with Lonnie Johnson as a veteran, and a couple other guys in camp there. So for me, on the defensive side, the defensive back group is one I'm interested in keeping up with because it is so young. And are they gonna get exposed because they're young, they don't have a lot of veteran leadership, or are those safety duo of Justin Reed and Juan Thornhill, are they going to make up for a lot of that? If they're getting guys in the right position, can we rely on the skill set of a Trent McDuffie as a rookie to really be a lockdown corner and kind of do what Marcus Peters did in his first year? And then, of course, you pair that up with L'Jarius Sneed, who we know is quality. He's pretty much going to play a lot of nickel. But they have a lot of exciting things there. I think the one guy that's been the biggest camp surprise is probably Josh Williams. Not very highly touted coming out of the draft. I think he was a 7th round pick. He might have been undrafted. If I'm wrong, I apologize. But he might have been a 7th round pick or undrafted. He's kind of been getting the most looks at that 2nd spot on the outside corner because Rashad Finn's been hurt. And he's looked pretty solid so far. He's held his own. But what do you think of this cornerback group and then safeties, and what have you liked to see so far, and what are you looking forward to seeing out of the preseason with them?
I think that's one of the biggest question marks for the team is they've got a lot of options, but who's going to step up and fill those roles, I think, is still something that they're going to have to figure out. And you were saying like if we were going to just put rookies out there and kind of see what if McDuffie can have like a Marcus Peters season. And I think the only way you can do that is to put them out there in situations that they're going to get experience, so you know what you have in certain situations. And I think it may be something that progresses over the season, because once again the defense has historically been something that's taken a while for like Spagnuolo's defenses. They don't start off real hot, and then it seems like they improve as the season goes on. And I think that'll be even more so with a rookie, because they're trying to learn all the schemes and then be in the right places and then make the plays on the ball. But like you said, Joshua Williams is that's pretty exciting to be able to draft somebody like that, and then they're getting reps with the ones already, and they probably didn't expect that coming into camp, but you never know who's going to surprise. And I think as far as opportunity, corner and that whole defensive backfield's a good place for guys to step up, because there's opportunity there.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention it too, but rookie safety Brian Cook is another one to throw in that mix. He's kind of a hybrid guy. He can play near the line as an extra safety in the box, rush the quarterback. He can play back, take the tight end. You slip into the deep safety role. He's another one that has a lot of opportunity to show what he's capable of. So that's what I'm excited about with the preseason finally getting underway. So guys, if you haven't realized this yet, this is the first official weekend with football, whether it's the NFL or college football, for the next 6 months. We're going to have 6 months of football starting this weekend. You don't have to let a weekend go by without football anymore. That's exciting. So preseason does get underway this weekend. Chiefs have their first preseason game Saturday. They are playing the Bears at noon up in Chicago. In preseason, we're probably not going to see much of the starters. I don't think Andy Reid's mentioned how long they're going to play. I know from the Bears side, they said their starters are going to play several series, if not a full quarter. So as we get into preseason, it's not so much about the starters. It's a lot about the depth guys, and that's what we're going to talk about here for a few minutes. Look at some of the position battles and guys that need to have a big preseason to really stand out. So let's start with that receiver group again. Really you've got about 6 or 7 guys fighting for 5 or 6 spots. So right off the bat, Juju, MVS, McColl, and Sky Moore are all for sure locks at receiver. Then you kind of get into those extra guys that are going to fight for spots. So we got Corey Coleman, who they brought in the offseason. A little bit older receiver, but really quick. A lot of experience in the return game. He's fighting for a spot. You've got another younger guy in Justin Watson that they brought over from the Bucs. One that's probably got an edge up right now because he's a big special teams guy and kind of can replace Marcus Kemp in that way. You've got Darius Fountain, who was everyone's training camp darling last year. Didn't get much time at the NFL stage during the season, but spent the whole year on the practice squad. He's kind of had a rough camp just because he's been injured, so hasn't had a lot to show. Then, of course, you got Josh Gordon, who we're going to talk about now. He's really the biggest question mark at receiver, I think, because he is older and he has not really played well. So he's got to have a huge preseason. And then, of course, Cornell Powell that they drafted last year. Haven't really seen anything about him at all, so don't really know what he's capable of. He has had a little bit of time with the ones the last couple of days, again, just to see what he's capable of. So looking at that receiver core, who do you think has the most to prove during training camp and the rest of the preseason to fight for a spot?
Well, like you said, I think Josh Gordon's the big one. He's, the guy that they're hoping that can step up and kind of regain maybe not all of it, but some of that form that he was several years ago, with the Browns. I think between him and Powell, maybe Powell has been buried on the depth chart so far in his career, so maybe he hasn't had the opportunities to showcase what he can do, or he just hasn't looked all that impressive. But I think Josh Gordon and Cornell Powell would be the two that I think if they can show out in the preseason games, that they would definitely increase their chances of being able to make the team.
Yeah, Gordon's the main one for me. This is his last chance to show that he is capable of being an NFL receiver. Didn't really get much time at all last year. Some of that is Andy Reid's system. He doesn't really let new guys get a lot of run with it. But he's been here for almost a full year now, about 10 months. So he's had plenty of time to understand the playbook. He just hasn't been that impressive in training camp practices so far. He's had several drops, hasn't had a lot of time with the ones. I think he has to have the biggest preseason. Otherwise, he's not making this team, and he's probably never playing a snap again in the NFL. So I'm curious to see how he looks. If he has a decent season or decent preseason, that might force his way into the rotation. But really, at the end of the day, I think they're going to take 6 receivers into the season. So let's assume it's 6. Who do you think gets those final 2 spots out of that group?
I would think, like you mentioned earlier, that Watson, he's a big special teams guy, and I think when you're talking about those last few roster spots, that when you can contribute to special teams, that just gives you a leg up on some of the guys that can't. So I think he would be one that would make it. And then, that last spot is just kind of, I would say, who takes advantage of the opportunities in the preseason. For me, I kind of hope it's Josh Gordon, just because you kind of feel for the guy. He had a lot of, issues with drugs and mental health, and it just seems like he could have had, much more of a consistent career up until this point. So you're hoping that a guy like that can turn it around. And for me, I would definitely say it would probably be Watson and Gordon.
Yeah, I think those are my 2 picks. It almost seems like Justin Watson's a shoo-in. Once you're at that end of the rotation, the final 48 to 53, that's where Dave Tobe gets his pick of the roster, and he wants someone that's a special teams guy. Watson's been a tremendous special teams guy with the Bucs, and he just fits that role perfectly. I don't know what his ceiling is as a true receiver, but if you can be a gunner on kickoffs and punt team and can really make an impact there, you're going to make this roster. And I think for me, if it's not Josh Gordon, I think it's Corey Coleman. Similar skill set, good athlete, good size, lots of speed, experience in the return game. You can never have too many guys in the return game. So I think those are my 2 picks.
Yeah, he's another Baylor guy too.
Yeah. So how about the running backs? We're not sure how many guys they're going to keep. Really, the offense really depends on, do the Chiefs go with 3 tight ends or 4? Because if they go 4, that probably means they're only taking 5 receivers instead of 6.
Mm-hmm.
If they go 4 tight ends, they're going to take 5. If they go 3 tight ends, they'll take 6 receivers. The Chiefs are one of the few teams that still carry a true fullback on the roster. So Michael Burton's making this team as a fullback. So that means they're going to either carry 3 running backs and a fullback or 4 running backs and a fullback. All this is going to really be dependent on the tight end position. So let's just look at the running backs. Clyde is probably a lock for still being on this team. This is probably his last year to be on this team unless he plays well. But then you've got Ronald Jones, who they brought in. Very different fit from a typical Andy Reid running back. Bigger, more of your goal line back. Could fill that Darrell Williams role from last year. Don't know what he's like in the blocking game yet, and he's not the best in the passing game. But he's another guy in the mix. Of course, they brought back Jerick McKinnon, who really turned on at the end of the year last year. And then you've got a couple of your younger guys with Pacheco, Derek Gore, and Ely. Pacheco's obviously the one that's had the best camp so far, so he seems to be a shoo-in for the team, especially if he lands as a returner. What do you think about Ronald Jones? A lot of fans think he could be one that gets cut or traded. Do you think he does get a spot on this team, or is he one that you think ends up getting taken over by someone like Derek Gore?
That's tough because, like you said, it depends on if they're going to keep 4 running backs and a fullback. Jones has experience, which I think that he's got that going for him. And like you said, he's different than what Andy Reid normally has, and I could see situations where that would come in handy. Like you're, 3rd and 1, and everybody knows you're going to run the ball, but you still need to be able to get that yard. I think he would be pretty valuable there, but I think he probably makes the team just because he's a veteran and you kind of know what you're going to get from him. And I don't know if they think they can get Gore by on the practice squad again. I think that might be something that they take into consideration. And they could always bring him up because he showed flashes at the end of the season when he got his opportunity. He ran hard and he had big chunk plays. So I think if he does get an opportunity and if he plays like he did some of last year, it's a tough decision. You can see they're kind of 2 different styles of players. You can see the benefit of both. I don't know what they're gonna do But if I had to guess, I would say that Jones makes the team, and then they try to get Gore on the practice squad. It like you said, it all depends on how many numbers they're keeping at each position, whether they're going to keep more tight ends or they're going to, take one less tight end, keep another running back, or if they're going to keep 6 receivers. There's a lot of decisions that are going to have to be made, but I trust Andy Reid because he's the offensive guru. He's going to figure out the best way to utilize their skill sets. And with Mahomes, I think he can bring any offensive skill position player, like he can bring their game up just with the way he plays, just extending plays and just a kind of that competitive mentality. I think everybody wants to play and be around Mahomes, and I think that just brings the best out of everybody.
So again, preseason's getting underway this weekend. Only 3 preseason games now. This is where we're really going to see those depth chart coming together and those position battles taking place. You'll know pretty quickly after the first game, I think, who's got the leg in and who's on the outside looking in. Running backs, just like you were saying, it all depends on how many tight ends they take and receivers. I expect Gore and Ely to start on the practice squad. Pacheco being the lone young guy in that group. I don't think Jones is getting cut. I think they brought him in here for a reason. So really just becomes, do you keep that extra back in Gore because you're worried about injury concerns with McKinnon and CEH?
Clyde he's never really made it through the whole season without.
So preseason, like I said, getting underway this weekend. Looking forward to it. Football's back. Chiefs Kingdom. Tyler, do you have any expectations or things you're looking for specifically during preseason? I know we don't get to see a lot of the starters, but are there any guys specifically you're honing in on that you want to see have a good preseason?
Like we touched on before, I think Josh Gordon's really got to take advantage of his opportunity. I think he's gonna get his chance to solidify a spot on the team, and if he has a good preseason, I think he will make the team. But you're excited for the young guys because they're gonna get a chance to play. And this is their first NFL game action, so that's gotta be, it's gonna be an adjustment for them. And then you're also looking at, even if they don't make the Chiefs roster, they're also auditioning for, all the other teams in the NFL, and you never know. The Chiefs may find somebody that's a cut on another team that they could pick up later on. But it's pretty exciting with the guys we have. Just looking forward to football being back. Is it 2 preseason games? 3. So because they added 1 extra regular season.
Now you get 17 regular season games and 3 preseason. So 20 games on the schedule for total.
So they kind of got to cram the preseason in 3 weeks, where everybody's used to having the 4 games. You can kind of stretch it out where your starters play in the 3rd game, and then. So it'll be interesting to see who starts, who plays the most, who gets the most opportunity. And what they do with it. It's exciting time. Like you said, 6 months of football. Can't get much better than that.
Yeah, football is back. It may not feel like fall out there yet, but football is back for sure. Well, I think that'll do it for today. Tyler, thanks for coming on. First time on the podcast. How do you think that was? What was that experience like for you?
No, I liked it. I had a lot of fun. It's just fun to talk football and talk Chiefs with other guys like you that are passionate about the Chiefs and football like I am. It's fun to bounce ideas off of, and you're always learning something, and when you're talking about new guys that are making the roster and stuff, you're memorizing new names and trying to put faces to the names. You hear these guys get drafted, and then you try to do a little bit of research on them, but you don't know what you have. And it's fun to just be able to see them in their first game action and see who takes advantage of that. But I had a blast. It's a lot of fun talking football, and it's the Chiefs are just. It's going to be exciting.
So like we said, this is not going to be the last time Tyler's on with me. We're going to do quite a bit of football stuff over the next few weeks, especially as we get into college football, talk a lot about KU football and what their season looks like. So Tyler, thanks again for joining me today, and I look forward to having you on future episodes.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
Alright, so preseason underway this weekend and football is officially back, and like I've mentioned before in previous episodes, with the return of the NFL season, that also means fantasy football is back. And if you're like me, you're going to be playing fantasy football. I've been doing it for over a decade now. Even if I'm not winning and making money, it is still a ton of fun. So like I mentioned in previous episodes, I'm in the process of getting a few episodes together for you right now to get you prepared for your fantasy football season as well as your upcoming drafts. So we're going to talk draft strategy, we're going to talk roster construction, how to put together a successful winning team, and then we'll do a couple mock drafts here coming up soon. If you are in a league, I highly recommend you do not draft until after the last preseason game. You don't want to be the guy that drafts someone who gets hurt in the final preseason game. Doesn't really happen much anymore, but if you haven't done your draft, hold off on that at least until after you've heard our episodes. So make sure you follow us on Twitter at The Sports A Gurus and on Facebook at The Sports Authority Gurus so you can stay up to date on all the details coming down the line about those fantasy football episodes. And as a reminder of where you can find the podcast, we are on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and on YouTube. Please hit that subscribe button, and we will see you in the next episode.